Hi, I'm Anna Wells, and welcome to episode number 175 of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me today are Jeff Franke and Ben Munson. We're the editors of manufacturing.net and Industrial Equipment News. We all have years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. David Manti is out on a pontoon boat somewhere, I assume, enjoying his week, I hope. So he'll be back next week. So every week we cover the 5 most popular stories on our websites, and we discuss the implications that they have on the industry moving forward. So please make sure that you like, subscribe to, and share the podcast. You can help us out by leaving a positive review on whatever platform you use. You can email us at Jeff, Ben, or Anna at in.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Tell us what you think. Argue with us. People do it all the time. It's okay. We don't mind. David minds, but
it's a hard time letting that one go.
Yeah.
Still do it because it's fun for us.
Yeah. Please continue with your emails. We are live every Thursday at 2. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel at IN Magazine to get a notification of when we go live in case we're running late, which is usual. Okay. This week's episode is sponsored by Oracle NetSuite. We're going to hear from Oracle NetSuite now.
Thanks for joining us today as we discuss a very popular topic in the industrial sector and, well, pretty much any market where companies like to keep the lights on and make money. And that's how to improve and expand operations. I mean, this seems like a very familiar and obvious goal, but just like anything else, there's a right and a wrong way, or at least better ways of achieving these types of goals. Today, we're going to discuss 3 of the 7 recommended strategies. We'll finish up with the last 4 in part 2 of the series.
All right. Thank you to Oracle NetSuite. Listen now to the new podcast, How to Improve and Expand Your Business Operations. In this episode, Jeff and David discuss the very popular topic, market where companies like to keep the lights on and make money. So you can download that now at any time. All right, let's kick off, guys, with our first story. So this is the 5th most popular story on our websites this week, and it's about NASA. The headline reads, NASA causes panic by accidentally airing space station emergency drill. So NASA just scared the heck out of a lot of International Space Station followers when it accidentally aired an emergency medical drill during a live stream. In an era that's being likened to the infamous 1938 War of the Worlds radio broadcast, where a terrifying program alarmed listeners who were not informed it was fictional, a NASA live stream was interrupted by a speaker announcing that an astronaut on board the ISS was suffering extreme compression sickness. The voice said the astronaut's prognosis was, quote, relatively tenuous. And this does not sound good.
That's harsh.
Yeah. And reportedly asked crew members to check the astronaut's pulse before placing them in an oxygen suit. The ISS later took to X to clarify that the audio heard during the live stream was not real, just part of an ongoing simulation. So panicked live stream viewers shared relief afterwards online, with one saying the incident inadvertently just cost NASA immense public confidence. The NASA snafu comes as the ISS is playing host to Boeing's Starliner capsule and the airliner's first ever human space launch, which has been forced to extend its stay due to more technical issues. So, Jeff, when you first read this story, visualize it in your own mind. Do you think you would have been concerned?
I think there's a couple things that were kind of interesting here. First of all, when they talked about when the live stream was taking place, the astronauts were sleeping.
Yeah, they were sleeping.
So what was the live stream? Like, what were they watching?
That's a really good question. Like,
that's a little creepy.
Watching them sleep?
That's a little concerning. Like,
hobbies.
Really? Do we have that many people? The one thing that caught me too in the article too is when somebody said they inadvertently just cost NASA immense public confidence. And my thought was, once they actually explained what was going on, I understand and appreciate the immediate reaction of people who were worried, like, man, there is something going wrong. Somebody's really sick up there. How are they going to handle this? But once it was explained, I think what it showed me is just how, if this was the biggest issue we have up there, I think we're doing a lot of things right. If the fact that basically it was just an audio crossover. It was a problem for a simulated exercise that was taking place, I believe, on the ground even. So I think that was the biggest takeaway I had from the article. A little bit of overreaction there, but obviously you've got people who are very passionate about this subject matter, so you can appreciate the initial response there.
Yeah, I wrote the article and was kind of cherry picking a little bit there. Most people just expressed relief that nobody was dying on board the ISS.
Which is positive. That is a good thing. We're happy when people aren't sick up there. And the other thing it got me looking at was the ISS itself. I guess I kind of underappreciated just how massive of a structure this thing is. Like, it's as big as a football field, as wide as a football field. There's like 8 miles of electrical line running, over 350,000 sensors that are just focused on making sure that the crew and the actual space station are safe and secure. So there is a ton going on up there. When you look at the history as well of the space station, the biggest issues that they've had during the whole time it's been up there is basically getting hit by little meteorites and creating damage just as you could imagine. So between that and navigating space junk, it's good to know that the biggest alarm we've basically had from the ISS wasn't a real one. So I think that was kind of my takeaway looking at it more closely. Pretty amazing what it has been able to do, and the thousands of experiments that have been conducted up there and are ongoing at the moment. So again, with everything going on up there, this was our biggest issue and drew the biggest concerns. I think they're doing a lot of things right.
Not the worst thing that could happen up there. Yes, I totally agree. Ben, so the listeners to the ISS live stream, the most dedicated NASA enthusiasts on Earth, is that your thought here?
Yeah, I think it's safe to call them that. Yeah, and it's pretty cool. I mean, the people that really hung in there, especially like while the astronauts were sleeping, which has got to be probably one of the more boring times for the live stream. They hung in there, and their dedication kind of paid off this time because they were some of the first people to know about this. You know, it was a fake emergency, but it's still kind of a crazy story. And I agree with Jeff that if this is the worst thing that's happening on the space station, then operations are actually running pretty smoothly. And fortunately, according to NASA, there's never been a medical evacuation on the ISS. I'm sure we would have heard about it. And they said that this, the agency said this speaks well for their kind of integrated medical group's strategy on board, especially since they said there were several medical evacuations during the previous Russian space stations. So they were shooting people down all the time.
Yeah, lots of stuff.
Lots of issues. Yeah, like I need to go. Yeah, but the ISS does have a plan in place in case astronauts on board need to evacuate. And that really kind of came into question more so, I think, 2 years ago. And you had mentioned meteorites too. I think that was what caused it was like a coolant leak on one of the spacecraft that was docked at the space station. And after that happened, at least according to Extreme Tech, NASA started talking with SpaceX to use the Crew Dragon, which is the other spacecraft that docks at the ISS, as kind of a backup plan in case they do need to evacuate. But yeah, all in all, it's great that nothing happened, but it felt like a big deal because it
could have been.
It's like yeah, and it just brings up the whole backup plan for an evacuation thing too, because it seems like the only thing kind of scarier than having to evacuate a space station would be like knowing you can't if you need to.
Yeah, true. Great point. Yeah. I know. And I think the situation seemed real and it seemed scary because the details involved in what the voice was saying included some points about evacuating somebody to, I think, a facility in Spain, like they were going to send somebody back. And so I think that's why people freaked out. But it also speaks to the level of specificity that is, involved in what they have just for a simulation. Like you said, they have plans. They know how to deal with this. So yeah, that is a relief for sure. Yeah.
And like, I think Jeff mentioned this too. The simulation was running on the ground and it accidentally aired. And so I'm hoping they weren't just like blasting this over the loudspeaker in the ISS while these people were trying to sleep.
So it sounds like it was an issue with like the sound guy.
I feel like there's some tension. We'll get back to you on that. Let's move on to our
technical difficulties with my microphone. We know why now.
Let's move on to our next story. This one is titled "A Southwest Airlines Plane That Did a Dutch Roll Suffered Structural Damage," and we'll tell you what a Dutch roll is. A Boeing 737 MAX suffered damage to parts of the plane structure after it went into a Dutch roll during a Southwest Airlines flight last month, U.S. investigators said. Following the event, Southwest performed maintenance on the plane and discovered damage to structural components, according to the NTSB. A Dutch roll is a combination of yaw, or the tail sliding side to side, and the plane rocking in a way that causes the wings to roll up and down. Pilots are trained to recover from a Dutch roll, and most modern planes include a device called a yaw damper that can correct the condition by adjusting the rudder. A preliminary FAA report said that after the Southwest plane landed, substantial damage was discovered to a unit that controls backup power to the rudder. Aviation safety consultant John Cox said the two-way oscillation of a Dutch roll was a dangerous phenomenon in previous Boeing jets, but not in 737s, because the design of the airplane will dampen the Dutch roll out naturally compared to older models where pilots could lose control. In this case, the pilots did regain control and no one was hurt. And while the NTSB has downloaded data from the plane in order to investigate, there may be some gaps. It's been noted that the cockpit voice recorder was overwritten after 2 hours. All right, Jeff, when you first saw this story, I know it's just like a big eye roll on that last part, but what do you think happened here, and who do you think is to blame, Boeing or Southwest?
Yeah, Boeing had another week, didn't they?
Every week they have a week.
Yeah, they just cannot get out of the limelight here. I'm going to press pause on this one for Boeing's sake. I think it is fair to wait till the NTSB finds out a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Also, with the prerequisite that I am not an aviation engineer or mechanic or technician or anything like that, but when you look at some of the elements and how people responded to this incident, I think it is worth waiting, because the actual operator here may have a lot more to do with this than the actual builder of the aircraft. There's a lot of maintenance that's involved in this particular area of the aircraft and these particular products that are in place, these systems and components. So I think it's worth waiting to see to make sure that they were maintained properly. There are some pretty strict maintenance procedures and inspection procedures specifically focused on this part of the aircraft. So it's worth waiting to see if was Southwest doing their part. Did they fulfill their obligations here, making sure everything was safe? I think it's also worth waiting to see how the pilots responded. Because in a lot of instances, and a lot of reports that you saw online following this situation, people acted like this doesn't happen very often. And when it does, it's not a real stressful thing for the pilot to handle. Mm-hmm. It's usually pretty quick for them to understand what's going on and react to it. So I will be looking forward to seeing what the NTSB has to offer in terms of following up to this. I know Ben's got some interesting thoughts on the term that they use here, the Dutch roll. Mm-hmm. We were debating whether this would be more tasty than a Swiss roll.
Yeah, no, I didn't have much for lunch, so the more we talk about Dutch roll, I'm just like, that sounds good. I want one.
Should be the name of a dessert.
Yeah.
Or maybe like a dance move is kind of what I was feeling from that.
I mean, I guess that's like more or less kind of what it is. Like it's named after like an ice skating term.
Yeah, it's exactly an ice skating term.
Yeah. But Dutch roll sounds good, you know. I would go for one.
It definitely put a better face on a lot of the other stuff that Boeing was dealing with, because in addition to this, you know, we saw stuff about they're having difficulty replacing their CEO, who is currently in front of Congress, you know, or the Senate, I believe it was, actually getting a lot of questions based on safety, to the point where one actually asked him, "Why haven't you resigned yet?"
But he has resigned.
Why are you still there? Basically is what they asked him. Why are you still in this position? So yeah, Boeing's got a lot to deal with. So on this one, I'm not going to say give them a pass, but let's push pause before we totally maybe go off on that.
Right, and it seems a little fishy that the cockpit voice recorder was overwritten like so soon after they landed too.
I think that has become sort of a matter of course with some of those black boxes, and that seems to be like every time you hear about like, oh, the security footage was wiped, the black box was wiped. Like, how often do you hear that? It's just way too often.
Yeah, but you know, me being hungry aside, a Dutch roll it sounds pretty serious, actually. You know, I was kind of doing a little research on kind of the history of this sort of aerodynamic phenomenon, and I looked up some of the recent incidents. Like in 1959, a Boeing 707. That's just a coincidence here. Sorry, Boeing. But the test flight, it fell into a Dutch roll that was so violent that it caused 3 of the aircraft's engines to rip off. Ooh. And the plane crashed near Seattle, killing 4 of the 8 people that were on board. And then in 1985, a Boeing 747, again, Sorry, Boeing. We just keep bringing up their name, but that's what it was. And this one had years earlier had been damaged in the rear fuselage and bulkhead, and they said it was repaired, but then it was experiencing a Dutch roll, and it caused loss of control after the aft pressure bulkhead ruptured. And that plane actually crashed into a ridge and killed 520 of the 524 people on board.
Whoa, wow.
So it's a crazy thing. And, especially on these like older models, I mean, I think like they make it sound like if you're flying like a 737 or anything newer, you can kind of just take your hands off. Take your hands off the wheel and it'll just kind of fix itself. But, pilots had to be trained. And I'm sure there is still like some alarm that comes with that when you start kind of fishtailing almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think what's interesting in this case too is, planes have basically designed this problem out according to the experts. And so this John Cox, who was quoted in the article, he also spoke with the Washington Post. And what he said was that the damage that they uncovered to that backup system was what was really perplexing to him. He said that damage from Dutch rolls is actually very uncommon. So he said that he has, quote, more questions than answers about the Southwest incident based on that. So to your point, something else may be going on there with like from a maintenance capacity or something else going on with that plane because it doesn't sound like something that, again, commonly occurs at this stage of the game.
Right.
And now when it does, according to other reports, the example that you brought up, would be incredibly uncommon today. More so, it causes uncomfortableness for flyers like motion sickness, nauseousness. Pilots are now trained to be able to like get those back under control. And so the recommendation is to just, be buckled and be in your seat. I thought that was important to point out too, when we're seeing more turbulence, and scientifically they're saying that turbulence is becoming more and more common for flyers. And so maybe the flying experience is just generally getting less smooth. So I guess keep those belts on while you're...
Well, hey, at least we're not paying more for... Yeah. Oh, wait. We are.
This sucks because air travel was like super fun before. And now it's like...
Yeah.
Now you got to worry about the yaw damper systems.
I know. It was so comfortable already, and now
we were having a great time. Yeah. And now the yaw.
Now the yaw. All right, our next most popular story. Man pleads guilty to stealing major EV makers' secrets. A German and Canadian national residing in China named Klaus Flugbiel has pleaded guilty to stealing a U.S. electric vehicle company's trade secrets and using them to build a China-based business. Though the DOJ did not share the name of the EV company that's in question here, the New York Times has said that the mystery company is Tesla. Flugbiel's former employer, Hybar Systems, was a maker of battery production lines that was acquired by Tesla in 2019. At issue in this case is Hybar's proprietary continuous motion alkaline battery assembly process. Flugbiel said to, Flugbiel, I'm falling apart on that. Flugbiel is said to have conspired with another ex-Hybar employee, an unnamed person who is still at large, to access PDF versions of the original assembly drawings and build a business in China together. They allegedly hid that the documents were copied. Where were we? And then they got caught because they tried to provide docs to an undercover FBI agent posing as a business person interested in buying a battery assembly line. So this gentleman faces up to 10 years in prison. No word on his co-conspirator, but clearly these guys are in some trouble here. So, Jeff, Tesla in the news again, right? This time for something completely kind of outside of what, we've been seeing. So what do you think happened here?
Well, first of all, when you're saying somebody's name like Flugbiel here, you need to channel your inner David Manti and just like reaffirm yourself. Like, because he'll say the name and just be like, nailed it, and keep going. just go with that.
I did not.
Sure everybody knows.
Did not do that though.
I think this is interesting, and obviously this is beyond Tesla's control. Oh wait, we don't know it's Tesla. It's victim company number 1 or whatever, according to the DOJ report. Except we know it's Tesla.
Very easy.
What's really interesting, is we also don't know the name of the company that these two individuals were operating under in China while they were taking part in all this sort of illegal activity with this stolen information. So the thing that came up into my mind right away is, who were they selling to? Because they stole everything in 2019, shortly after the acquisition was made. They weren't busted till last November. So they had 4 years to do a lot of damage with IP that was not theirs. And when you look at China, number one, it's the biggest EV market in the world. Something like 60% of all new vehicles purchased in China last year were electric vehicles compared to like 10% here in the US. So it's a huge market. Tesla is making major moves to try to be a bigger part of that EV market in Tesla. So if these folks were working with BYD or SAIC or some of the other huge Chinese automakers over there, the long-term impacts here could be enormous, especially if you're Tesla. If these folks were illegally sourcing Tesla's proprietary information to build their batteries and to be used within their vehicles, what's the fallout there? How will this, the Chinese government has not always been real favorable towards American companies to begin with operating over there. Or is there some recourse that Tesla can take long-term in terms of getting back that technology, somehow handcuffing these other Chinese competitors that they have over there? It's going to be interesting how this one falls out and how this continues to develop. There's a lot of different factors involved, more beyond just right and wrong. There's also political ramifications here too when you're dealing with China, and a couple of those automakers are state-owned over there too. So are they really going to slap themselves on the wrist in trying to do basically what would be the right thing? So there's a lot of different things in motion here. This is another one sort of like that Southwest Boeing situation where we need this one to play out a little bit and see what's going to happen here, because it could be a big impact.
Yeah, I agree. That was the most interesting aspect of the story to me as well, was just the fact that it was taking place in China and not knowing what that would mean and how far, it would impact the relationship that Tesla already has in China. They have a gigafactory there. They've been assembling almost 1 million vehicles there last year in their gigafactory in Shanghai. As you said, there's a lot of Chinese state-owned or state-influenced operatives in the auto industry there. Does Tesla open themselves to more IP infringement just being there? And, how much of that do they just sort of absorb in order to sell in China? Or, it's hard to know what happens next. But I guess we'll find out. Ben, tell us what you know about Klaus.
Oh, yeah. I think I found Klaus Flugbiel on LinkedIn.
Must be it.
Yeah, I crushed it. Yeah. And if this is the same guy, then his background image is pretty ironic or like iconic, I guess, however you come down on this story. But the profile I found has a picture of a quote attributed to Benjamin Jowett, and it reads, "The way to get things done is to not mind who gets credit for doing them." And I just thought that was like an incredible thing.
Wow.
This is an incredible thing to have on your LinkedIn profile after you just pled guilty to stealing trade secrets.
Yeah.
I was like, man, this guy just has no shame.
Well, maybe he felt like it was his job to share this battery production line IP with the world.
How dare you, Elon Musk?
How dare you keep this under lock and key? Well, thanks.
The world needs this information.
Thanks, Klaus.
Also, if they had 4 years to forge documents, how did they screw it up? Especially they didn't want dealing with like an engineer type. They were dealing with an FBI informant.
Well, apparently they made new PDFs.
That's what they said. Change the format.
Yeah. Take the Tesla logo off, put it on a new sheet, and then I don't know.
They had plenty of time to get this right.
Yeah.
The fact that they got caught is kind of mind blowing. I don't know.
But if there was an informant, obviously something else was going on to tip somebody off.
Were they like, hey, where did you get this from anyway?
Yeah.
Just from us. Wasn't from that company that bought us.
I made it.
Nope.
I made it.
Yeah. Klaus came up with it.
You think they just taped something over and it was kind of like peeling off a little? So like, oh, wait a minute. What's underneath here?
Tesla.
Wild.
Doesn't make any sense.
Not Flugbiel.
Well, best of luck to you, guy. All right. Our next most popular story, Ford quietly building low-cost EV team with rival talent. Ford formed a skunkworks team more than 2 years ago to work on a low-cost EV platform, and it appears the automaker has been quietly boosting its talent pool since. According to a new report from TechCrunch, Ford's low-cost EV team has added about 300 to its headcount in the past year. That includes significant numbers of former employees from EV rivals like Tesla, Rivian, Canoo, and Lucid, along with some engineers who floated over from Apple's recently closed automotive project. Didn't we see this coming, right?
Yep.
The dream of a low-cost EV is one that Ford shares with other automakers like Tesla and Stellantis. And while Tesla has temporarily shelved its aspirations for a cheaper electric car, Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares said consumers should expect a $25,000 all-electric Jeep from his company, quote, very soon. For now, though, at least at Ford, the price range is still elusive and gas-powered vehicles still account for the vast majority of sales. That said, Ford's EV sales spiked 88% last year over the year prior. All right, Jeff, what do you think about this hiring pool?
Well, it's interesting that they're going for a lower price point. They're being very transparent about that with this group of individuals. Because when you look at Tesla, Rivian, Canoo, Lucid, I don't think of lower priced vehicles with that collection of companies. I mean, these are sort of positioned as more premium offerings. So to take that engineering prowess and sort of redirect it into a lower priced vehicle is interesting there. I think there'd be some definite paradigms to overcome. But you are entering sort of the Ford culture, and this is where they're focused right now. I get a little nervous when companies come out and it feels like a race to the bottom. I understand that one of the biggest hesitancies or one of the biggest challenges right now for increasing EV sales is that initial cost. I do understand that. But when you start talking about vehicles at $25,000, that also doesn't create a lot of confidence in me. When you're touting a low price over everything else, I worry about that, especially when you're looking at a technology that, while it might feel mature to a lot in the engineering community, for the consumer, it's not. So I think the better focus here, as opposed to saying, hey, we're coming out with a low price offering, is to say, we're working on technologies that are going to improve over the long term. When you look at buying a vehicle, your biggest reoccurring expenses are tires, brakes, and oil. You can't avoid those things with an internal combustion engine vehicle. We've already eliminated one of those with an electric vehicle. But some of the ongoing costs for an EV are higher. The maintenance costs may be less frequent, but if you have to replace that battery, man, I mean, that's $10,000 right there potentially, or in that neighborhood, depending on what happens. So I think focusing on that as well as the energy usage and focusing on energy density for those batteries is a better way to put a lot of these resources and a lot of these engineering minds. I just get worried when you start coming out with that. I think because the other part of this, and it's difficult, I get to look at things from sort of a 50,000 foot view. I'm not every day being hit with, hey, why aren't sales higher? What's happening with our stock price and all of that? But there does need to be a patience here with the EV side of things. The bigger part of the vehicle purchasing market hasn't gotten involved in EVs yet, and they will, because number one, they won't have a choice, but number two, because it's becoming more competitive from a technological perspective, and they're going to be willing to make that upfront cost in exchange, especially if they know over the long term, there's going to be savings from a maintenance perspective. They know the vehicle is going to last longer. Right now, on average, an EV should last about 50,000 miles longer than an internal combustion engine vehicle just because of the fewer mechanics involved. So tout those things and focus on those long-term savings as opposed to, we're going to come up with the cheapest one. I don't like that as a tactic.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the reality of the low cost component is going to be interesting. And your term race to the bottom, I've often thought that as well. It concerns me a little bit. I don't think any of these automakers have scaled to the point where they thought they'd be when they started lowering prices to this point. I think that was premature, and it was based on not only market conditions, but also that domino effect that started when Elon Musk started cutting prices, and then everyone felt like they had to fall in line with that. But ultimately this has to bleed out from somewhere. You can't put a $25,000 Jeep on the market with all this dev cost built into it and not get that back out somewhere, right? So whether that comes in the way of job cuts or, maybe the $25,000 entry point is a very great marketing scheme, but that's coming with like the really small battery that's only got 100 miles of range, or, you know, you have to pay extra for all the premium things that people actually want. Because at the same time too, I also don't think that EVs need to be less expensive than the average ICE vehicle. I mean, I think we're kind of overdoing it, maybe overcompensating in a way that maybe isn't necessary.
I'd agree.
Ben, what did you think about this story?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily like a race to the bottom. Like, I've been reading into it, and it doesn't come off as like we need to push the biggest, you know, the smallest, crappiest car out we can at the lowest price point. And even to, you know, this is the CEO of Ford talking, so of course, you know, he has a vested interest here.
Yeah.
Right. But he said his company expects every one of its EVs to make money in the first 12 months. And he said that's why the company, like, so far has delayed like its 3-row crossover. So it could work on new battery chemistry and formats that he said would reduce costs. So I think that they're serious about this project, and that, you know, this is a platform that they can build multiple models on. You know, it's just like kind of a lower cost starting point that they can build other things onto. And he said to the effect of that, wanting his EVs to be profitable within the first year, he said that one of his best bets is that the new small affordable platform being developed by the team on the West Coast, which I assume means, or it's the same as the Skunkworks team that he mentioned before. He also said that Ford's connected data from EV drivers shows a lot of customers in suburbs and urban areas, and Farley believes that those shorter distance drivers in these areas are going to drive EV adoption the fastest. And so that's part of why they're so focused on making a small, more affordable EV. And then to illustrate the price point too, he noted that, you know, when they lowered the price on the Mach-E, the volume went up by 141%. But that's to be expected. If you make something cheaper, you can sell more. I mean, that's not like crazy business insight, you know, like, what? Are you kidding? Yeah. But I mean, it seems like they do have their reasons, and they're putting together a team that is pretty substantial. So I'll be interested to see what they come up with.
Yeah, I guess I wonder what this does too, though. If they do end up going this route and they really get in up to their elbow on a lower priced model, and I know this isn't what the OEs are thinking about, but what does that do from a consumer perspective to the used car market down the road for EVs? Granted, you're looking at these vehicles lasting longer, but everybody likes to switch out. I mean, there's just somebody who switches a vehicle out at 50,000 miles, regardless of what's going on. So if they're already at a 25,000 price point, what does that do then for the used car market, which is a big deal for consumers? We learned that during what was going on the last couple of years. So there's other factors, I think, that go into this too, that whether you like them or not, you have to be cognizant of and keep in mind when you're doing stuff like this.
Yeah, and that upending of the used market is happening now. I mean, people with Teslas are seeing that firsthand. They're seeing their vehicles that they paid top dollar for a year, 18 months ago, and then they're completely underwater on what they're worth now because of how much the price went down on those. And so, of course, you're going to have that, you know, transition point is going to happen at some point. But yeah, it's not. You see a lot of leasing, I think, too, in electric vehicle industry, just because the technology is moving fast enough that people feel like, well, I can always trade it in 2 years. I should try it out. And
is it better for consumers to start at a lower price point or start at a higher price point and then keep coming down until they kind of meet you where you're at? You know, because I mean, if at least if you start at that point, then you've kind of set the bar. You know, but you know, yeah, like you said, when people bought at high prices and then the cost came kind of crashing down, yeah, they were hosed. But that's to be expected in pretty much any industry, right?
I mean, I think that's what you look at it from two perspectives. From the consumer perspective, obviously you want the best deal possible, but when you look at it from a bigger picture and how the market's going to play out, it makes more sense to start higher and work your way down. So hopefully and obviously, I mean, look, these folks have been in the automotive market their entire lives.
Yeah.
They're paying attention to these variables too. And a lot of this is probably just to generate some headlines and goodwill.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and likely this will still only be a small part of Ford's overall EV business. I mean, they're still selling a lot of the F-150 Lightning, and then they have a huge commercial EV business as well that they're kind of relying on to drive further growth. So hopefully they know what they're doing.
They might know more than us. We'll see. Jeff, fun fact before we move on, the batteries on EVs are actually, there's a mandate by the federal government that they be warranted by for 8 years.
8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay.
So just so you know, if you ever buy an EV, then you just sell it at 7.5 years, and then you're fine.
What if you're in an accident? Same deal?
That's your insurance.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure. I mean, your insurance will insure your whole vehicle, right? If you.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Okay. Never mind.
Fine. All right. Our most popular story this week is about another electric vehicle maker, this time Fisker, who has filed for bankruptcy protection. So electric vehicle maker Fisker has filed for Chapter 11, the second electric startup to do so in the last year, as even industry leaders struggle to lure more EV buyers. The company, in a statement, blamed various market and macroeconomic headwinds that have impacted their ability to operate efficiently. Fisker Group, Inc. said in a filing with the U.S. Bankruptcy Court in Delaware that its estimated assets are between $500 million and $1 billion, with estimated liabilities up to $500 million. The electric car company was founded by designer Henrik Fisker, who has been its chairman and CEO. He designed the company's 2022 Fisker Ocean all-electric SUV, as well as the luxury plug-in hybrid Karma that was launched in 2011. Electric vehicles grew only 3.3% to nearly 270,000 sold during the first 3 months of this year, a much slower pace than last year. And share of total U.S. auto sales for EVs fell to 7.15% in the first quarter. That has led to huge price cuts, as we discussed, and job cuts even at leading companies like Tesla. Troubled EV startup Lordstown Motors also sought bankruptcy protection last summer as it dealt with funding difficulties. Lots of other issues. Fisker says that it's in advanced talks with financial stakeholders about debtor in possession financing and also selling its assets. Ben, let's start with you. What's been going on with Fisker? We've been seeing maybe some writing on the wall, do you think?
Yeah, not a lot of good has been going on with Fisker. It's been showing a lot of signs of decline for a while now. Like the company previously said it didn't have enough money to keep going through the end of last year. It was looking for a partner in a major automaker. And that was reportedly Nissan, who was a big investor in the company. But now those talks have been called off. The company also slashed the price of the Ocean. And then last month, this is probably the biggest clue yet that the ship was sinking. One of Fisker's manufacturing partners revealed during their earnings call that the 6 week pause that for Ocean production that had been put in place in March had kind of gone past that point, and that they didn't expect any further production to take place. So that's a sure sign that something's not going right when you stop making the cars. Because that's kind of their whole thing, right?
Yeah, selling cars, I think, is the thing.
Making and selling cars. And so if you don't make them, you can't sell them. And that's sounds like what's happening. I'm just curious, they listed their assets as worth about, $500 million to $1 billion. And I'm curious, what do you think they're listing as their assets? I mean, they have manufacturing partners, like I think they were working in the Lordstown facility in Ohio, I believe. And then this manufacturing partner in Austria was building the Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, what do they have? Or do you think they have anything that might be worth something to one of the other EV makers that's still up and running?
Capital equipment for a bargain. It's hard to know how much that is inventory also.
Yeah,
who knows?
Yeah, if it's full price inventory, it's obviously different than what they're selling it at. But
for
these types of situations, I'm sure it's inflated as high as it possibly can go.
Probably. Jeff, what do you think is going to happen here?
Well, it's funny with Fisker because we always talk about how hard it is to make a car. People kind of underestimate that. It seems like for Fisker, it was also difficult to deliver cars and actually charge people for them. I don't know if you guys saw this, but TechCrunch actually had an article in March talking about how Fisker had failed to cash checks for things like down payments, reservations, complete vehicle payments.
What?
Basically, they lost credit card receipts. They lost checks. They lost millions of dollars in revenue. That was basically customers going, here, take my money. And Fisker's going, thanks. Just a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, we need it, but let's give you the car first,
Come
which
on.
is great in premise, but you kind of need that. So TechCrunch was basically saying at a time when they needed people focused on selling vehicles, they were spending a ton of energy just tracking down all of these payments, which in a lot of instances had basically gone outside the timeline. The check wouldn't clear. Whatever the case would be, millions of dollars. Bloomberg also just tore into these guys in terms of not delivering vehicles, and not asking people to pay for them. Just a number of logistics issues that they also were dealing with here. So Fisker had a lot of problems. And what it leads to is, you go on their site and you're looking at, you guys referenced it, the Ocean's a $62,000 CUV down to like 38, so those are huge, huge numbers where you can tell they're just trying to get these vehicles out the door. And this would be tempting, except there's no place on their website where I can figure out how you get this vehicle serviced.
Oh,
if something happens, what do you do? I mean, how do you set up a test drive even? I understand maybe that's something you can get into this new dynamic of vehicle purchasing and just sort of go with the flow. You understand all the stuff that it's going to have and all that. But at a minimum, I need to know if there's a problem where I can go, and that's nowhere to be found. So yeah, guys, it's not just tough to make a car. You got to do all the other stuff too. And that seems to be where Fisker really, really fell down here. Especially after that huge infusion of private equity money that kind of came in terms of people wanting this to succeed, and does not look good for them in the long or short term.
And it's, they make nice looking vehicles. It's unfortunate to me because I agree with a lot of what you said. Like, it's unfortunate to me to see this lumped into that refrain of automakers need to woo buyers because they've gotten to all the low hanging fruit and nobody wants to buy EVs now. Well, I don't think all these EV brands are created equal. It's not just about transitioning people to a new technology. Fisker has to add to that challenge that it's a startup. And for many buyers, I think doing both of those things at the same time is too much.
Yes.
It's like a step too far. Like, they'll transition to an EV if they have a local service department that they can take it to if anything goes wrong, or say the reassurance of Tesla's being all over the place at this point. Those are the things that kind of prove and support the tech. Why buy a Fisker when you could buy a Hyundai, a Kia, a Ford, or anything that, if there's a recall or whatever, you can just go down the street and talk to an actual person. So I just think that that's just a hurdle too many for a lot of buyers. Emerging tech combined with potentially nowhere to go if you have an issue. Fisker has something like a dozen dealers, I think, in the U.S.
Yeah, closest one to us would be like Indianapolis.
Right. And I just don't think you can overemphasize the barrier that comes with that. And, you could say that Tesla had to deal with the same issues, and they did, but they were also not competing with established automakers at that time for the electric vehicle buyer. And now that they are established. So it's a different environment for a newcomer now. I think, there's a layer of risk there. And unless they have something super compelling, like you see with Rivian, maybe the eye-catching designs, the bigger models, the longer ranges, they have like a nice niche in that large SUV category that a lot of companies have not tackled yet. Unless you've got something like that, you're just like another member of the pack, but with fewer advantages because you're new and you have less of a network. So I don't know. And then when you add to it all of these like bonehead, like unforced errors.
Yeah. Well, they've had some quality issues too, some issues with the brakes, which that's kind of a big one. You want to be able to stop.
Brakes are good.
Yeah.
They have to work.
They have to work. That's what they do.
And you are dropping some dimes here.
Thanks, dude.
That is
just hanging back, waiting for my shot.
Stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we move on to our In Case You Missed It stories that were not as popular on the website, but still interesting enough and should be discussed, we think, we're going to hear another word from our sponsor, Oracle NetSuite.
Thanks for joining us today as we discuss a very popular topic in the industrial sector and, well, pretty much any market where companies like to keep the lights on and make money. And that's how to improve and expand operations. I mean, this seems like a very familiar and obvious goal, but just like anything else, there's a right and a wrong way, or at least better ways of achieving these types of goals. Today, we're going to discuss 3 of the 7 recommended strategies. We'll finish up with the last 4 in part 2 of the series.
All right. Once again, this week's episode is brought to you by Oracle NetSuite. Listen now to the new podcast, How to Improve and Expand Your Business Operations. Jeff and David will discuss this topic, and you're going to learn a lot. Right, Jeff?
Oh, yeah. This was a great one. This was when we did in 2 parts because there was a lot of different information to put out there. It seems like a lot of common sense stuff, but with a little bit more depth that Oracle NetSuite offers in terms of going after these ways to grow your business. It was a great conversation and good white paper. So take a look at them.
All right, great. Yeah. I mean, who can't improve, right? We all could. Download it today.
I'm on the fence. No, just kidding.
Yeah, I thought you guys would be like, yes.
Ben and I were kind of like, we're pretty good at this already. I don't know.
All right. Yeah. Don't download it. You too. All right. We're moving on to our In Case You Missed It. Ben, let's start with you this week. What do you have?
Okay. My In Case You Missed It is FDA clears video game for treating adults with ADHD. Akili, I think I'm pronouncing that right. I hope I am, is a digital therapeutics company, and they just announced FDA clearance for Endeavor OTC as an over-the-counter treatment for adults with attention deficit / hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. Endeavor OTC is indicated to improve attention function as measured by computer-based testing in men and women with primarily inattentive or combined type ADHD who have demonstrated attention issues. The subscription-based mobile game essentially challenges users to complete tasks and filter out distractions at the same time. And as someone who's played video games for almost their entire life, and also heard multiple times the old kind of like video games will rot your brain stigma, this really feels like a little bit of vindication here. I mean, if the FDA is on board, then I think a lot of other people can be on board too. I was just kind of wondering, where do you both land on video games? Are they a worthwhile use of your time, or are they a waste of your time?
Well, I'm not really a video games person, but I don't have any issue with video games as long as like you can function as an adult and do other things. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like that's no different than like not sitting in front of a TV all day, right?
Yeah, and I think I'm mostly functioning adult.
I mean, you're here, you're at work, so that's important.
I made it in today.
Yeah, way to go.
You tore yourself away from Legend of Zelda to be with us. We appreciate it.
Yep, I did.
Jeff, are you a video game guy?
I'm kind of in the middle. What I have learned is a lot of the video game stuff. First of all, the new ones can't keep up. Mm-hmm. My daughters play and just laugh at me because we're playing like one of the Star Wars games, and I'm trying to like run through and find them and do whatever, and they're just like, "We're behind you." Boom, lost your head. Mm-hmm. So I'm not very good at them, but I do enjoy them. As far as where this article came in, because I read this article too. This one caught my attention right away for a number of reasons. First of all, there has been a lot of scientific research identifying the value of video games for a lot of the different types of controls that are being put into place into a lot of different industries right now. Mm-hmm. We look at robotic surgery, for example. That's becoming more and more popular for a lot of different applications, a lot of different procedures. And it's been scientifically shown that those who have a background in playing video games could be really, really good surgeons in the future because they have the dexterity and they're used to the controls. Same thing when you look at things like industrial equipment. You know, when you look at backhoes and things of that nature, a lot of different stuff there. It takes a lot of hand-eye coordination that is really honed through video games. So I wouldn't say this is an excuse to do it all day, every day, mm-hmm. but there is definitely some demonstrated benefit to being proficient at video games. The other thing that caught my attention here is when you talk about ADHD, I think we can all look at case studies in our personal life, people that we know that were probably went through this for a long part of their lives that were not diagnosed, mm-hmm. wasn't really treated. And as a result, it took those individuals a long time to sort of find their home or their niche in what they could do extremely well in a day-to-day basis. My brother's one of them. He was never diagnosed with ADHD. There's not a doubt in my mind he had it because when he would sit in class, forget about it. Mm-hmm. You showed him something, how to do it, He picks it up immediately and he's good to go. So I think these types of things bring more attention to those who struggle with this, with ADHD, and identifying alternative methods to help them deal with it and then bring out what they could really be good at and contribute to. All for it. And I think it's awesome.
Totally. I agree. And, you know, it is harder, I think, for adults with ADHD who have not been diagnosed as children to be diagnosed accurately and correctly. And what an amazing way to kind of circumvent the pharma route and just approach this from another way. Because, you know, every drug has a side effect. There's no way around that really at this point in history. And so if you can treat this in a way that you don't have to do that, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, great pick, Ben. Jeff, what was your, in case you missed it this week?
So I picked an article called CISA, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Administration, warns of impersonation scam. I picked this one for a couple of different reasons. I mean, you guys know cybersecurity is sort of a topic near and dear to my heart. It's something I've become a lot more passionate about and learned a lot more about because it started to impact the industrial sector so much more significantly. But CISA put this out. Basically, this was a warning saying, hey, folks, people might be calling you and saying they're from CISA to start obtaining information from you. And this is just a reminder that we are never going to ask you for personal information. We're never going to ask you for money. All of these things. And this comes at a time where because of things like SolarWinds, all the way back to Colonial Pipeline, we've talked about a number of different hacks that have been going on here within manufacturing over the last year and a half. People are on edge. People are worried. So they're thinking, I got a call from the guy at CISA. These are people here to help me, which they are, but sort of a wolf in sheep's clothing type of scam here. And these are becoming more and more prominent in our daily lives, but specific to manufacturing as well. And I think what this really brings to light is the fact that there's so much more what is referred to as social engineering going on right now. We think of it as the bad guys, the hackers, and what they're doing is anything they can to get any little piece of information about you. Where you went to school when you were a kid, where you graduated from high school, what year you were born, all of this type of stuff, because these are different potential pieces of information that they can compile and put together and getting more and more about you that they can continue to use for nefarious reasons. The more that they know about you and your background and they can use on a different phone call to somebody else, at some point they're going to land a social security number, an email address, a login, or things that they can use to construct these types of things in creating their algorithms. So it just is another demonstration of being so incredibly careful and diligent when you're providing information, especially more stuff over the phone lately is what we're hearing about because people put their guard down a little bit. It's less technologically savvy. It's not going to a website. It's not somebody emailing you and clicking on a bad link. It's something as basic as a phone call. And it's just becoming more prominent as, again, trying to do all of this and putting together all of this data on you. So just another reminder to be careful, common sense. Nobody's going to ask you for payment information or personal stuff over the phone if you don't know them. So,
Jeff, this is scary.
Yeah, it's scary and it's awful. Like, I feel like I'm pretty good at spotting like bad scams. Like when I get a text that says like, this is U.S. Post Office. We couldn't deliver package. What is your address and credit card? You know, and it's like, no, okay, I'm not going to do that. But now I'm very like, you know, skeptical of even like real stuff. Like I think I got my dentist sent me a bill. I was like, is this really you? Like, like I know I was there, but I'm like, how can you prove it was you? I mean, what do you want me to do? Go on your website and pay you? Yeah.
Show me my dental records and then I'll pay you.
Yeah. Well, all those questions are valid. And that's the type of stuff we have to do to make sure that we're not putting more and more data out there for the bad guys to grab onto. So it's scary, but there's also a lot of things in place that people are doing to make sure that these things are happening less and less. And a simple thing like communicating the fact that these types of scams are going on as a start, being receptive to it as another, and then putting systems in place. That's basically, it's about educating employees and everybody else as well, saying, hey, don't fall for this. This is what's going on. It's
just diabolical to impersonate the cybersecurity.
Well, and that's the thing. And it's always tough when you bring this stuff up because you don't want to just terrify people as to all the things that are going on, but you want to keep them in the loop. The good news is, and we talk about this on the podcast a lot, the Security Breach podcast, is there's a lot more good stuff going on too behind the scenes from a law enforcement perspective, but also in terms of tools that are out there to help safeguard your enterprise.
Yeah. Well, thanks for ending with that part because it's like starting to sweat a little bit. I feel like I just finally got my arms around the like, no, that is not a Nigerian prince. That is like part of my family. I inherited how much? What?
I still haven't seen that in my account.
Where is the money? Yeah, it does. It does seem like they're getting more sophisticated with the context and nature of the scamming, and a little bit harder to spot. It used to be a little easier to spot, but so stay vigilant, friends. All right, the in case you missed it, I chose this week. Was about a training program to prepare students to help keep astronauts healthy in space. And what I found interesting about this, so they talk in the article about how in the coming decades, more people will go to space than ever before. Obviously, we've been tracking the human space flight efforts that are happening. And the article points out, how many people are working on the technology side. And that's what we hear about in the news, right? The hardware and the aircraft components, the tests, all that stuff. But what about the fact that more and more regular people will embark on like a space flight at some point? And while astronauts undergo very extensive medical and psychological testing and are arguably maybe healthier than the average person, there will be more private crews in the future, likely less training, more chronic conditions. And so they said adding to that is just a very limited amount of data about how common chronic diseases such as like diabetes or high blood pressure behave in the space environment. Like no one knows that because no one has gone up there with those conditions. Sure. They get like cut from that group. So they're talking about like the current approaches to medical care in spaceflight that are really not going to meet the needs of future commercial and professional astronauts. So what they're doing is educators and universities are like trying to develop ways to train specialists who understand both the limitations of the human body and also the constraints of engineering design. So there's a program right now at University of Colorado that was created that integrates human physiology and engineering principles to train medical students to think like engineers. So the program aims to help students understand human health and performance in the spaceflight environment. And education programs like these and others are aimed to create cross-trained specialists who understand both like patient care, for example, and then the procedural nature of engineering design and can actually merge the two, whether that's for space tourism or, pioneering another planet. There's just so much potential out there and so much need for this information that really doesn't exist right now. But I just thought it was like not only the application that they're putting this work into right now, consumers, regular people going to space, how interesting, but also just the fact that this collaborative effort where they're taking, these two disciplines and kind of combining them. And I thought it was a really cool program. We see this so often in manufacturing. You could have the most effectively designed glove, for example, but if it's in the field, too hard to get on and off because you're sweating, because it's too hot in your plant or whatever. Yeah. But it's perfect in a lab. And so no one knows that. Then people stop wearing it and then they get hurt. And that happens so much. And so just adding the human element to the design education, I think makes such a massive difference. And especially in this uniquely emerging application, I thought that it was very interesting. Because eventually, like the people that are going to space are not going to be the most like scientifically advanced, healthy people. They're going to be the people that have the most money to pay for it. Yeah. Really, I mean, right? There's a lot of money tied up in this. They're not going to turn down somebody's check. So we got to figure that out. Ben, what did you think of this story?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Like speaking as somebody who can say like confidently that they're probably in the worst shape of their life, like you can't send me to space. Like if you put me on the shuttle and launch me into space, I'm just going to vaporize.
You think you'll like combust?
Yeah.
Too many video games, Ben.
It would be a mess.
Get off the couch.
Too many video games. I know. But yeah, it's nice to hear them considering, I know that's a very long-term way down the road, but to think about, if space travel is going to become more accessible, it has to also be, accessible.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Jeff, what did you think?
No, I thought it was interesting. One of the things that caught my eye here is they talked about in space, for example, radiation and humidity inside a spacecraft can cause medications to deteriorate or even become toxic.
Whoa.
So like learning a lot of these specific environmental factors, and obviously this is sort of a little bit more extreme dynamic or application here for it. But I mean, being able to do this and maybe this leading to other areas where we could see based on your job function or your daily activity, the ideal diet, and sort of getting more specific there. I think that's the type of thing that always is very attractive to me. I think a lot of people really gravitate towards that too, where you can plug in different variables and say, you know what, it's okay to have a cheeseburger, but you should also have some carrot sticks with it, or whatever the case is based on what you're doing. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, very much so. All right. So before we head out today, we'll close with some final thoughts. Ben, what do you have for us today?
My final thought is bruises. I have one right now, right here. I don't know if you can see that. You guys can see that. It's not a bad one. But I was like, I can't remember or even guess where I got it. And it just made me think that I bet there's a lot of other people that like you get a bruise, and I'm sure you guys probably keep careful track of your bruises, always up to date on that. But I bet a lot of people don't know where they come from. I mean, unless it's something serious, you're just, it's always like, what did I do? Yeah. So not a great final thought, but
keep track of your bruises.
That's what I got. Yeah.
My kids are just like bruise town, and then I'll ask them like what happened, and they have no idea. Like, oh, I banged it on my bike.
I can relate to them. Yeah, I don't know what happened.
And the kids, they always seem to discover their bruises at the worst possible time. I mean, it's different. Mine are older now, but they'd be like in for their physical when they're 8 years old, and the nurse would be like, "Where did that bruise come from?" I don't know. I'd be like, "I don't know either." I'm not that bad of a parent. I just don't know where that came from.
Well, if it makes you feel better, Jeff, our pediatrician said that if kids don't have like bumps and bruises, she is more concerned than if they do, because she wants them to be out and about exploring the world, right?
There you go.
So just like the normal, shin bruises should be there. That's
man. My youngest daughter had more bruise than shins growing up. That's for sure.
Yeah. So. Yep. My final thought today was this morning when I was getting ready for work, my 6-year-old son told me that he didn't want to go to day camp. And I told him that I had the podcast today, so I had to come to the office. And then he asked if he could watch the podcast. And then he did. And he watched it for like 20 minutes, like fully like engaged. He was asking follow-up questions. It was pretty awesome. Man. So we have a new fan. He is, I don't think, watching this right now because what? But but I'll show it to him, I guess, now going forward and see if he's got any feedback on the stories that we're covering.
Don't worry about the email, the podcast coming from your son.
He does not know how to email or type. So
don't show him.
We're
about the follow-ups.
We'll be fine. He will come to your house, though.
He did like the cats.
He does like your cats.
Maybe you can help Ben with the bruise thing, too.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe he's got some ideas.
He could at least talk to you about it because he experiences lots of bruises. So.
Well, it doesn't hurt, but, you know, it's like.
I love the yellow phase, though. That's like get over it, you know?
Yeah,
like just move on.
Yeah, it looks bad. Come
on. Jeff, your final thought.
My final thought is a plea for the Madison Softball League to get some technology to help them communicate weather impact on sporting events. It's kind of crazy when you look at all of the technology that's out there, and still there's this big part of our lives that is impacted by something like the weather. Like sometimes that blows me away in terms of how we can overcome all these different challenges and still get something done. But when it starts raining, everybody just like, well, that'll do it. Mm-hmm. I don't know what to do now, whether it's driving or just communicating. The fact that we can't have like an app where they just basically say, no softball. And because the last 3 weeks we've shown up like at the time thinking we're not going to play. And then one time we were supposed to, another time we weren't. Last night we all got to the field and they're like, no, we can't play. So just kind of voicing my concern over here. And if somebody's got a really simple app program or solution to this, I would really love to hear about it so I can share it with the powers that be so that I don't have to, number one, hear everybody else complain about it and then also do it myself. So weather.
Yeah.
Old man shaking fist at clouds.
Maybe shoot a text. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
It can't be that hard, right?
Yeah.
It can't be that tough to just say, we're not playing today, as opposed to showing up at the field and finding out that way.
What about like one of those light up buzzers like you get at the Olive Garden when your table is ready?
I like it.
Something like that where you could be anywhere.
Yeah.
It's not hard.
But then it's like, is this a scam? Like, we're not playing softball tonight. What was your pet's name growing up?
Good point.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
We just can't have nice things anywhere.
You can't be too careful. All right. Well, that about wraps it up for us this week. Before we go, please just make sure to like, subscribe to, and share the podcast. And to email us, feel free, Ben, Anna, or Jeff at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Or David, he misses you, I'm sure. Start an argument with David at david@IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily and weekly e-newsletters on our websites. Please enjoy those if you're interested in more manufacturing news. All right. For the team here, we will see you next week. Thanks for joining us.